Right, hello and welcome to our presentation on the Big Five Questions, a guide to textual analysis. So the Big Five Questions are a really useful tool to help us make sure that we've covered everything we need for an analysis, whether that's an oral commentary or an essay, whether that's a play, a social media post, a poem, or a blog post, or a newspaper article. Whatever it is, we can apply our Big Five Questions. So let's get into the who. Who refers to the audience as well as the author of the text. And it's really important that you be as specific as possible when deciding who the who is. So, for example, I've seen a lot of students default to, oh, it's adults in America or adults in Australia. It needs to be more specific. So ideally you want to have about 3 layers to this. So it might be age group plus gender plus job or interests or political standing. You can also include details such as the time period. Is this for people in the 2010s, 2020s, or in a lot of texts that we tend to look at in our course, 1960s civil rights movement audiences, and covered some of these as well. Now, we also need to consider the audience, who created the text, and that means the author's context. So did they have any political leanings? Were they active members of any political groups? Were they involved in any protest movements or literary styles that are important for their work? Next question up is the what. This includes purpose, and remember there's at the basic level, there's 3 different purposes. There's persuade, entertain, and inform. And of course we can get a little bit more subtle with these purposes, and so it could go to things such as to enlighten, evaluate, define, instruct, explain. That's fine as well. If you're stuck on purpose, just default to those 3 basic ones to get your starting place. The content, you need to tell the examiner what's the topic, what's in this text. Genre, it's useful to identify the genre of a text because that often will tip us off about structural elements and why those structural elements are there. It can also tip us off on audience as well. And genre can be really broad, for example, fiction, non-fiction, literary, non-literary, or it can get a little bit more specific as well, such as tragedy or romance or thriller. So genre is quite important, I think, in terms of helping us deconstruct a text and make connections to audience and purpose. Theme. What are the main themes in the text? So these are the big ideas, and they're usually general things such as love, death, marriage, social structure, judgment. So those are parts of the theme. Message, on the other hand, is more detailed. So if a theme could be war, for example, a message might be the condemnation of war. So we're getting more into specifics here. Bias, what is the writer's stance? Are they pro something or are they negative to something? This is particularly important for political texts. Next, context. This is the context of history. This will be important for a lot of the texts that we study in our course because the historical events of the times really influence the works that are produced. It also includes the context of the author, and we've touched on that a little bit already. And one thing that some people miss out on is the context of the reader. That means is the reader on board with the author? Are they antagonistic towards the author? So these contexts are important as well. Question 3, how T, or tone and mood. So remember, tone is the writer's attitude in the text. And these are going to be things like, well, if the writer is hopeful, passionate, belligerent, or paranoid. And how do we know this? So we want to try and connect this to the stylistic devices and the structure of the text. Mood is very similar, except mood focuses on what the reader is experiencing and feeling. And so that could be inspirational, bouncy, mellow, optimistic, pessimistic, or melancholic. And again, how do you know? We want to try and connect these things to the stylistic devices as much as possible. All right, question 4 is how S, structure. So this can take many different forms. Structure can be embedded in the text type, for example, essay, news report, letter, narrative. It can be more specific in here as well. So for example, if it's a poem, we can get into the details on what type of poem. If it's a sonnet, what elements does a sonnet have to work with for the author. It also includes what happens in the beginning, the middle, and the end of the text. It includes sentence variety. Are there long and short sentences? Are there incomplete sentences? And that's going to come important as we're studying Margaret Atwood's poetry. Strong beginnings and endings are a great one. They're really important for speeches, also poems as well. Often the most important lines in poetry are the first lines and the last lines, so that's essential for us. Is there any contrast of ideas? So for example, a news article might provide positive information and then negative information about the topic. If there isn't any contrast of ideas, that can tell us something as well. A news article that presents just one side of an issue is going to be very biased, and maybe we need to be more suspicious of that news article. And again, we want to try and connect these things to how does the structure support the purpose of the text. Right, and our last question, stylistic devices. What devices is the writer using? And the key thing there is, why did the writer choose to use those devices? Diction is a really important one. Another way to describe diction is word choice. And that's going to come up again and again and again, especially as we deal with Margaret Atwood's poetry. Other examples are here. You can read those yourself. And the key thing, though, is that we want to try and connect them to purpose, audience, theme, mood, and message. If we can do that, then we're really analyzing, we're explaining how a text works, how a text achieves its purpose. We can use it to evaluate the text as well. All right, that's it for now. Take a look at the presentation on Google Classroom, and then we'll go and look at an example with Crow Song from Margaret Atwood.